This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate. This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate. This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you. It's been a long time. Where are you nowadays?
NBC Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not. I'm just covering today.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, great.
Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We've come together today to discuss with you an effort to bring relief to Californians who find themselves facing an agonizing death without the legal option to end their suffering as they choose. There must be a better way, and there is. We are here today to announce the introduction of our bill, SB128, the End of Life Option Act. Joining us is a broad coalition of supporters and advocates from across the state, including a number of our colleagues from the Senate and the Assembly. We have, of course, Bill Monning and Susan Talamantes-Eggman, Assembly and Senate, respectively, and they will speak shortly. We also have with us Mark Leno, Hannah Beth Jackson, Ed Hernandez, Jerry Hill, Mark Stone, Christina Garcia, and Bill Quirk. Much has changed in the last 10 years since this was last discussed in the California legislature. 4 more states, Washington, Montana, New Mexico, and Vermont, have joined with Oregon to adopt laws for the end-of-life option. SB 128 would allow terminally ill, mentally competent Californians the option to request and obtain a prescription from their physician for aid in dying medication to relieve pain and ease suffering. In order to receive the prescription, the terminally ill person is required to have 2 physicians confirm their prognosis of 6 months or less to live. They may not qualify solely because of age or disability. Participation in this law by physicians or by any person is voluntary. There is a full range of options available to people in the final stages of a terminal illness: other treatment, pain management, comfort care, and hospice. This bill would add 1 more option as a last resort. SB 128 closely follows Oregon's law, which took effect in 1997, 17 years ago. Oregon's experience demonstrates that this option has been used successfully, yet sparingly, without the negative outcomes that opponents predicted at the time. Support for this law runs across all demographic categories, from every ethnic, religious, and economic background. It is not a partisan issue. It is about personal freedom and guaranteeing the terminally ill Californians the right to exercise this option if they believe it is right for them. How each of us spends the end of our lives is a deeply personal decision, and that decision should remain with the individual as a matter of personal freedom and liberty without criminalizing those who help to honor our wishes and ease our suffering. This law will honor that freedom with appropriate protections to prevent any abuse. And now Senator Bill Monning and Assemblymember Susan Talamantes-Eggman will tell you more about this important legislation and our efforts in the area. And you will hear from the family of Brittany Menard and other advocates. We would ask you to please save all of your questions until we leave the podium and we come down to you. That will be at the end of the press conference, and we have set aside time at that point to answer any questions that you have. My colleague, Senator Bill Monning.
Well, thank you, Senator Wolk. I want to thank all of the members of the media for being here today. I want to thank our colleagues, and especially thank those who you'll be hearing from today who are here because of a tremendous loss, a loss of a family member. The Brittany Maynard family, Dr. Olvera, who you'll hear from, are involved in here today because of a tremendous loss. And we want to begin by offering our condolences to their families and to other families similarly situated. And out of respect for families who are still actively grieving, we are not going to entertain questions from the floor. As Senator Wolk said, people will be available for individual questions or interviews. Senator Wolk has set out the parameters of this legislation. We're informed largely by success in Oregon, Vermont, now Montana, Washington, New Mexico, in establishing a legal right to exercise choice at the end of life, including the choice of a death facilitated by a pharmaceutical prescription only after the strict criteria are met of evaluation by 2 independent physicians and a finding of mental competence. Again, this is voluntary and would not be mandated on any patient, any physician, or any pharmacist, or any medical institution. But at the core of this is respecting the dignity and the self-determination, and I believe a civil right and a human right, of a patient with a terminal diagnosis who faces a death sentence not of their own choosing, to have the power of autonomy and choice to manage that death sentence at the end of life, to be a peaceful passing with compassion both for patient and for suffering family members. You're going to hear from people who have dealt with the challenges at end of life and who are facing the challenges of an end of life diagnosis. I will just close by underscoring something that you will read in the legislation. We choose to call this an end of life option act. Some will describe this as physician-assisted suicide, and we strongly disagree with that characterization. As Brittany Maynard said in her own very eloquent and courageous voice, she said, "I don't have a suicidal bone in my body. I want to live, but I have a terminal cancer condition that will kill me. Within that death sentence, I choose to have some option to ease the pain, the suffering, and to choose the terms and conditions of my inevitable death." So in respect for her courage and sacrifice, we have named the act as an End of Choice Option Act and think that is the appropriate description. It's now my honor to introduce our Assembly colleague and principal co-author in this legislation, Assemblymember Susan Talamantes Eggman. She's the chair of the Majority Caucus in the Assembly, and Dr. Talamantes Eggman has nearly a decade's worth of experience in hospice care as a medical social worker and research experience in the field of end-of-life care decisions. That experience informs her legislative priorities, and in 2013-14 session, Assemblymember Eggman authored Assembly Bill 2139, signed into law by Governor Brown, which ensures that terminally ill patients be provided with the full range of care options available to them. In essence, that their caring physicians provide them with a supportive information of end-of-life options. So with that, I invite and thank Assemblymember Talamantes Eggman for her leadership in the Assembly and beyond the Assembly in her life's work. Please, Assemblymember Talamantes Eggman.
Thank you. Thank you, Senators, and thank you to all people who are here. And again, I echo in offering my condolences for families still grieving. As Senator Monning said, I worked as a hospice social worker for a number of years, and I can tell you that you learn a whole lot about living when you sit every day with dying. For many people, people want a range of options. For some people that's hospice, for some people that's palliative care, for some people that's treatment no matter what. but my experience has been that individuals want to die oftentimes as they have lived. And so for people who have experienced a high degree of control or a high degree of autonomy in life, to be able to carry that out into the end of their days is important. So I worked as a hospice social worker. I was in Portland in 1997 when the legislation went into effect, and I was getting a PhD in social work and social research. I was lucky enough to do my research internship at the Oregon Center of End-of-Life Decision Making. I did my dissertation on end-of-life. And the conversations that we were having now in California were very similar to the conversations that were going on in Oregon at that time. I remember seeing a cartoon that said, we're not going to have enough ground to bury everybody because people from around the country are going to flock to Oregon to be able to exercise this right. Over a decade later, we've seen that research, it is not true. A very limited number of people have chosen to use the law. There is virtually a no abuse of the law. So a lot of the fears that people have just have not come into being. And I will say, just from a personal perspective, I have also personally, at their bedside, cared for at least 5 family members as they have died. And so I come at this from many different perspectives. And I can tell you, in doing my bill last year, 2139, because previously, if a patient had a terminal illness from which no cure was expected, the law was that a physician, if asked by that patient, if asked by that family member, what are our options, would then say, you have hospice, you can do palliative care, you can do nothing, you can continue on. Coming from a Mexican-American background, I know culturally that oftentimes, like, my grandmother would not even have known to question a doctor, not even known how to say, you know, what else can I do? So the goal of my bill last year was just sort of to flip that to say that if a patient has a terminal diagnosis from which no cure is expected, that then the physician, at diagnosis or at a follow-up time, that patient would have to be provided with their full range of treatment options, including continued care, palliative care, hospice care, or nothing. And I can tell you that was some of the most emotional debate that happened on the floor last year, I think. It's an incredibly personal issue for people. It was a hard bill for me to get through. But I think the takeaway from that is that it is personal for people. People argue it from their heart, which I think serves to underscore the need for a law like this, that everybody should have the ability at the end of their life to have as much say-so over what they want to happen as possible. Also, as a professional social worker, one of our core values is around self-determination. So I think especially at end of life, people want to, again, die as they have lived, and for people who want to maintain as much self-control as they possibly can, they should not have to go out of state in order to exercise that option. So we think the time has come, and I'm proud to stand with the senators and the family members and my colleagues to talk about this very important bill today. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I'd now like to introduce Dan Diaz to you. He is the widower of Brittany Menard. Brittany and Dan were married less than 2 years when she was told that she had a few months to live after being diagnosed with a stage 4 glioblastoma. I'd like to welcome Dan and thank him for his courage in being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd actually like to start by saying thank you to the legislators that are on stage with me for putting forth this legislation, something that my wife viewed as an ethical and very logical decision. To that, being the fourth person up here, the points that have already been brought up were the very ones that I was going to put forth as well. That this is an option, that my wife, upon receiving the diagnosis of the brain tumor and the prognosis of having only 6 months, we were faced with the decision of, she recognized to stay here in California would mean that she potentially would face a horrific death. Brittany was a Californian. We lived in this state, and she would have preferred to have been able to pass away peacefully in this state. When she did receive the diagnosis of having the terminal brain tumor, she found that, well, the reality is we need to move to Oregon in order to avoid the horrific suffering that was coming her way. She was disappointed that we had to up and move to a state in the middle of dealing with the chaos of a brain tumor diagnosis and that 6-month prognosis. So my comments will be brief in that this option is something that Brittany and I thought should be available to all Californians and all people, really, regardless of what state they happen to reside in. I again thank the legislators for their wisdom in putting together this effort, and I look forward to hopefully this becoming law sometime soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. I also want to acknowledge a colleague, Senator Mike McGuire, who's joined us with our other colleagues. He wasn't introduced earlier. It's my honor and privilege to introduce to you Debbie Ziegler. Debbie is the mother of Brittany Maynard. Debbie wants to be a loud voice for her late daughter. Debbie made international headlines when she responded angrily to the Vatican's criticism of her daughter's decision to end her life under Oregon's Death with Dignity law. This is her first, she's had some media engagements. This is really her first public presentation, and so would ask respect and please no questions from the floor at this point. We're honored by the courage of the entire family. I present to you Mrs. Debbie Ziegler.
Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Ziegler. I'm Brittany's mama. She called me mama, so I continue to go by that. I want to thank Senators Bill Monning and Lois Wolk for authoring this End-of-Life Options Act, because this will help people who could not do what my daughter and our family had to do. This bill will give terminally ill adults in California the option to choose aid in dying. And I thank you with my mother's heart for doing this. Dying on one's own terms. I don't think it's something that we think about a lot until we are faced with something in our own family, a debilitating, cruel disease like brain cancer, and a terminal prognosis. It's hard to understand. It's hard to understand until it's in your life and it's in your world how important this choice to die on your own terms becomes. But when it does happen to your family, you see that this is a basic human right. In order to capture this option and what it meant to my family, I'm going to share a conversation that I had with my daughter. We had this conversation on a rainy evening in Portland, Oregon, where we had essentially been forced to move because we could not accomplish our goals in California. Very near the end of her life, after some news trucks had left and reporters had packed their things, I made banana pancakes. I was so tired, and Brittany was so tired. And we ate those banana pancakes and watched the rain come down. And we agreed that given her devastating brain cancer prognosis, that she was fortunate to have a mother and a father and a husband who had the resources and the time and the fortitude to help her establish her new home in Oregon. And this home would be the home that she would live the remainder of her life in. It would be the home that she died in. We knew that most Californians would not be able to do what we did. We knew they couldn't leave their homes. They couldn't leave their jobs. They couldn't leave their families, their friends, their pets. We had to do all of that. it added another layer of pain. We knew that it wasn't fair or right, that this was what we had to do, that in order to get this legal right, that we would have to go live there and qualify under their stringent requirements for terminally ill adults. In order to obtain the medication, we did everything. We dotted every I, we crossed every T. We followed every single bit of the program. And when Brittany received the news that she qualified and that she was going to get the medicine, it was a moment of peace. And so that evening, as we sat warm and dry and cozy, we were filled with, oddly enough, love and gratitude, because we knew we were where we needed to be. And in spite of all the added stress that we had been under, looking for, renting a home, furnishing a home, making a home, because my daughter did not want to just die in some cold, impersonal environment. We'd left our pets. She loved her dogs. My husband and I love our dogs. We left them behind. We had left friends. We'd left our supportive network. And yet Brittany and I felt appreciative of her legal right in Oregon that she could decide when enough was enough. My daughter was visibly relieved when she qualified for the medication. When she had the medication, she took great comfort in the assurance that she was the sole decision maker about how much pain she was going to endure. Her beautiful face softened. There was a peacefulness in her gaze. Excuse me. Californians, you now have a right. You have the opportunity to bring this option to this state. And I implore the citizens of this state, contact your senators, contact your assembly members, stand up and make your voice heard, even if it shakes, like mine. Please help me carry out my daughter's legacy. Please help me assure that other terminally ill patients don't face what we had to face. My daughter was full of life and energy, and she was determined that she would live life to the fullest, and then she would go quickly, without pain. She would slip away from us. There's a strange thing that comes with qualifying for this in the end. It gives you the ability to relax. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Once Brittany knew that her plan was in place, she could relax. And she and I had seconds and minutes and sometimes hours of sheer bliss. We went camping. We went to Alaska. We went on this boat trip that was magical. We went to a park in Washington, Olympic State Park. We went on hikes. We looked in tide pools. My fondest memories are of her bent over things, photographing them. And for those minutes of time, she forgot that she was dying, and she just lived. I am so grateful that we could live those moments free of terror, free from that terror that was reaching out for us every minute of every day until we knew this was going to be as she planned. And the night that we sat eating banana pancakes and looking out the window and the rain driving against the pain, she reached for my hand and she said, "Mama, given the hand of life that we were dealt, this is as good as it gets, Mama." And it was. Thank you very much.
For those of us that were galvanized by the story of Brittany Menard and the courage of her mother and husband, we continue to be just amazed at the strength that it takes to be public and share with the public such an extraordinarily personal story. Thank you. Thank you. I would now like to introduce the Reverend Dr. Ignacio Castuera. He's a Methodist minister on the board of directors of Compassion and Choices. He has championed numerous causes that have grown quickly into wider acceptance. He is the director of the Latin America project of the Center for Process Studies at the Claremont School of Thought. Welcome, Dr. Castuera.
Thank you very much. Muy buenas tardes. Ignacio Castuera, pastor metodista, member of the board of Compassion and Choices, the oldest and largest organization dedicated to expand choices at the end of life and to provide as much care for those who find themselves in that situation. As a pastor, it has been a privilege to participate in the moment of decision about life and death, when even family members sometimes are banished from the bedrooms of where people are dying. A pastor is welcome, and I have been in those holy of holy moments with people, and I have never heard a person say, I want to keep on going. They want to end the pain. They want to die in peace, and they would like to, if possible, avail themselves with some kind of a medical solution to what seems to them as unending pain. This understanding became quite dramatic for me during the times of the AIDS pandemic, when it first started, when Kaposi sarcoma was the death sentence. And I was there at Hollywood United Methodist Church, and I saw many young lives cut short, and many people suffered just the kinds of things that they shouldn't suffer. And some of them, a few of them that did have the means, were able to have their own ways of sort of slowly going with friends and taking something provided by a caring person, sometimes brought across the border, sometimes provided by just a caring nurse or a loving doctor. That should not happen. But I also was prepared little by little to face my own situations. When I was a pastor in one of the wealthiest communities in Southern California, I had the opportunity to witness something similar to what happened with Brittany. A young woman, a little older than Brittany, was begging her mother to do something, and she would say, we have treated our pets better than you're treating me. It was extremely difficult for me as a pastor to try to mediate between mother and daughter as they confronted that situation. Eventually, 11 years and 1 day ago, my father summoned my siblings and I to his bedside and said, I have lived 90 years. I do not want to live anymore with pain. I am not afraid to die. No le tengo miedo a la muerte, pero no quiero sufrir. And so on February the 2nd, he died because he refused to eat, refused to drink, refused any medication. Not the easiest kind of thing to do, and eventually died. That also shouldn't have happened. He should have had someone that stepped forward. We should have had at that time the kind of legislation that we're hoping that our state will soon have. I urge you all, I urge every Californian to work together with our elected representatives to make sure that the sacrifices that have been made by the Menard family do not turn into smoke or steam, but instead are solidified in a very strong movement that provides for every Californian the very right that Brittany wanted for each and every one of us. I thank our legislatures, and I urge you all to follow them. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Our next speaker is Dr. Robert Olvera. He's a family practice physician whose daughter died, Emily Rose Olvera. She was a 25-year-old Orange County woman who died from a rare form of leukemia on April 26th of this past year. During the last months of her life, Emily Rose suffered in agony with excruciating headaches and that no painkiller could alleviate. She was blind, confined to her bed, and struggled to breathe. I present to you Dr. Robert Olvera.
Thank you for having me here today. Thank you, senators, assembly members, members of the press, and most of all, Compassionate Choices. My name is Robert Olvera. I'm a physician. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force during the Vietnam era, and I'm Emily Rose's father. Until recently, end-of-life options would never have crossed my mind. But last spring, I saw my cancer-stricken daughter confined to a bed, blind, struggling to breathe, with headaches that no medicine could alleviate. "Give me some pills so I can go to sleep, Daddy," Emily said in a barely audible voice. "I don't want to be chemo sick. No one should have to live like this." As a Catholic, I never lost hope. I said every prayer I learned from my days as an altar boy in East Los Angeles. But as a Harvard-educated physician, I knew what was in store for Emily. I knew the end was near. Emily had a rare form of leukemia that crept into our lives when she was only 7 years old. Emily Rose received her last rites before she died in our home in Santa Ana. She had hospice care after a 17-year struggle with leukemia. But she didn't die the way she wanted to. My 25-year-old daughter should have had the option to request a prescription for aid-in-dying medication to prevent her 4 months of agonizing pain and torture that ended in April of last year. The Catholic Church has taught me that only God has the right to take our lives. But does God want his children to suffer? Cancer destroyed my daughter's brain. I watched Emily Rose decompose in front of me. She suffered horribly as I sat next to her, not being able to do anything. My hands were tied. Seeing a daughter suffer and die slowly is torture. Any parent will tell you that. Why did my little girl have to suffer needlessly from relentless pain at the end of her life? Why did she have to endure medical interventions that produce more pain than relief? All of this left her a shell of who she used to be. Emily Rose didn't want doctors or hospitals. She wanted her dog, her home, her bed, her mother's food, her surroundings. Emily couldn't get medication because it is illegal. I would not have given it to her, but if she had wanted it, she could have had it had we known about Oregon. We would have left in a heartbeat. This was in April. In November, I heard about Brittany's story, and they paralleled each other so much, I felt compelled to come out here and talk to you about this. Emily Rose had to die from cancer, dehydration, starvation, and sedation. It was not a pretty sight. The film keeps playing over and over in my mind again. Any of you that have children, think about this. Think about the legislation. Think about what you're going to do. You have to go from your heart. All of us will eventually meet our Maker, whoever that is, whoever you believe in. I'm at peace knowing that Emily Rose is now in heaven because we talked about heaven and we also talked about hell. I too came from a Hispanic background where not only did we not go see doctors, you did not become a doctor. Mm-hmm. My dad was a sheet metal worker and he still gets a free cup of coffee anytime he talks about me to his friends. Well, Emily's in heaven now where she's running free from cancer and hopefully she has her vision and her and Brittany have met up and made friends. I pray to God for the passage of the End of Life Options Act. Without this law, dying Californians in innumerable pain face a severe threat to their dignity of their lives as it comes to an end. I was told, how can I talk about death? How can I help people die? That's not my calling. My calling is to help people. Well, this may be a newsflash, but part of life is death. Everyone in here will pass. I will fight for you, Emily Rose. I will fight for Brittany Menard and other terminally ill Californians so they don't have to go through what you went through. Life is tough without you, Em. You are always in our hearts. God knows how much we miss you, but you don't suffer anymore. Thank you.
Our last speaker this afternoon will be Jennifer Glass. Jennifer was diagnosed with lung cancer 4 months after she was married in 2013. Her cancer seems to be contained for the moment. Good. Jennifer is living month to month, hoping that each CT scan will show that her cancer has not begun to grow again. And we share that hope with you. Jennifer.
I've always thought of myself as a top of my lungs kind of girl. But that's the very part of my body that betrayed me. Top of my left lung is where the tumor is. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. At the time, the American Cancer Society statistics estimated my chance of 5-year survival at just 5%. Friends and family said to me, "You'll beat this, Jennifer, you're fearless." Well, I'm not fearless, of course, but I have found ways to fear less. The most debilitating thing about living with life-threatening illness is often the fear that comes with it. Fear because so much is out of your control. If you can take fear out of the equation even a little bit, you can think more clearly, you make better decisions, and with luck, you can find a path to peace. One of the main ways that I fear less is by taking control of what happens to me at end of life. I'm at peace with the idea that my life will end. But how it ends if cancer runs its course terrifies me. Lung cancer is an ugly way to die. I would find great comfort in knowing that I had another option, that I might choose to be done with cancer before cancer is done with me. A little bit more than 2 years ago, I got married for the first time. My wonderful husband, Harlan, is here today. Together with Harlan's 2 kids, my stepchildren, we were just learning how to be a family when we learned that I have cancer. Throughout my illness, my greatest comfort has been being in my home with the people I love. Every time I've had to go to the hospital, I'm just so cold. And my home is warm. And it's familiar. It's where we have become a family, and it's where I want to die. At the time I was diagnosed, my cancer had already spread too far for surgery to be an option for me. So I underwent aggressive rounds of chemo and radiation, and now I take an oral chemotherapy, a pill I take every day that so far is keeping my cancer contained. It has hard side effects. I'm doing everything I can to extend my life. No one should have the right to prolong my death. I'm at peace with the idea that my life will end. I don't know how long I have, but I do know that it's an issue of quality of life, and that has to include end of life. The quality of my days would be so much improved if I could fear less about how it might end. It means so much to me to be here today. I thank all of you. We need your help so that every Californian knows what's at stake for each of us as individuals. So today, I'm asking for your help at the top of my lungs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Again, I want to thank all of those who have joined us, our legislative colleagues, and those who have shared the most difficult of stories, the loss of a loved one. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I'd say out of respect for the people on the stage and the family members, when we adjourn, we're going to go in a line out into the hall where people will be available for interviews. Because there's a lot of you here, we'd ask that you try to be respectful and short in your interviews so that as many people as possible can ask some questions. I'd also invite you and encourage you to talk to some of the legislative co-authors and get an understanding of why they've come on in support of this bill. I also want to close by thanking especially Compassion and Choices for its work in California and nationally, as well as the California Senior Legislature, which has ranked this issue and this legislation as one of its #1 legislative priorities. There will be no one-on-one interviews today with Ms. Ziegler. Out of respect for her, she shared her story with you. Please share and tell that story that she shared with you today. And again, thank you for being here, and this session is adjourned.